We're spending more than ever.
I hate my job.
The price of everything has gone up.
AI is threatening my job.
It's crisis after crisis.
Nothing is working out.
I can't find a job.
We're one disaster away.
Take control of change.
I need a change.
Disruption is the force of change. Stop the chaos. Stop the madness. Take control. Read James Patterson's Disrupt Everything and Win.
Public podcast RSS feeds versus private podcast RSS feeds. How to choose. How to choose the best RSS feed or the RSS feed to go with, and how to go with it is very important because that can either make or break your podcast show. And I'm not sure if you've heard about this, but there are podcasts out there that actually have, welcome Linda, that actually have private podcast feeds. And it's something that is actually not talked about much. Even when I Google it, I don't see much that people say. So I definitely know it's not something that people talk about a lot, but I want to make sure that if you've thought about it or if you've heard about it, this would be a good room and a good conversation and definitely a good episode for you to listen to. So what is a public podcast feed? Or what is a public podcast RSS feed? And then I'll break it down. What is a public podcast, really simple syndication feed? That's a very important question. So if you know that a public podcast RSS feed is a publicly listed show that is available on public domain third-party properties that can easily access audio just like you're accessing this. Welcome Akash and Hiromitsu. If you think about public podcasts, really simple syndication feeds, that's public podcast RSS feeds. These are technically podcast feeds that are accessible on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on iHeartRadio, or Pandora, or SiriusXM, or the list is endless actually. There's so much. There's Amazon Music, there's YouTube Music, there is, I'm just thinking about them out loud, there's Castbox, there's Podcast Addict, there's even Google Chrome. People listen to your podcast on a web browser. They listen to your podcast on a smart speaker. So all these accessible platforms on a website, on a platform that is very specifically drawn to be a place where somebody can connect or add a playlist or listen for free or just access by clicking through to it. That is a public podcast RSS feed. And don't confuse the RSS feed from the platform that you're listening to, because there are two types of podcasts, if I can say it this way. There are podcast hosting platforms, and then there are podcast directories, which is, in other words, podcast players. So podcast hosting, just like a website, you can have a website hosting on one platform, but your front facing could be another. So you could literally have like a Hostinger and a WordPress, or you could have a Squarespace and I'm just thinking, and a SiteGround or a GoDaddy. Whatever it is, you may have a completely different setup, but you'll realize that you have a hosting and then you have a CMS, right? Which is a content management system. We've talked about that. So with podcasts, it's not the same as website, but they're equally around the same way connected or interconnected, because a website has an XML file, which is it's an expandable markup language, right? Which is, in other words, a file that can be read by algorithms, search engines, by data intelligence, by databases, by natural language processing, by LLMs, large language models, that can read through that text and then read the context and link it back to you because of the relevance of the information. So that's how you have HTML, hypertext markup language. That's when you highlight a text and it turns blue and you put a link behind it. That is an anchored text. And that anchored text is a hyperlink, which is connected to a web link. When you click on it, it will take you to a website that's within a web page. So when you look at the whole construction and the architectural setup of this, welcome Shasha, when you look at this example and look at the ultimate effect about how this is even bringing more and more and more and more and more and more feedback to your base, you realize that the more you're able to put your website on a map that can be accessible by Google Search Console, Google Analytics, I've talked about this before, and you can put these platforms and more in a way that you can track scripts and run data and actually connect and actually build. When you start getting signups, getting people to connect with you. Because when people sign up to your email list, when people sign up to your community, they sign up for a reason. That's why you're listening to this podcast, because it's a public podcast. You're listening to it accessibly on any platform that you listen to publicly. So even though you listen to Spotify publicly, it's still a private experience because you have a private playlist. So it's the same thing that applies to any other person that's listening to this, even also for music, for audiobooks. It's the same thing. So if you look at it for a podcast, look at the public podcast as a place where you have a podcast hosting, which is any platform out there. You can start off with creators.spotify.com, which is creators.spotify.com. You can start off with buzzsprout.com. You can start off with libsyn.com. You can start off with podbean.com. You can start off with acast.com. There's so many that you can use, right? And you can build on those platforms for free to begin with, and then start using those to now expand more. Like for me, I'm on Art19. Other platforms are accessible because you can be on those platforms too. So if you go to Red Circle, if you go to Megaphone, if you go to, there's so many. There's so many. Even Kajabi now has podcasting. If you look at all these RSS feeds, they're all going to take you somewhere. But if you really think about the depth of where you're taking it to, you also have to think about the quality of the links, right? The technical quality of the links. That's why when you have a WordPress and you have a Hostinger, or you have a SiteGround, or you have a Bluehost, or you have a GoDaddy, you're on those platforms because you trust those platforms, because you want to use those platforms for certain things. So that's the same way with your podcast. You choose which podcast hosting platform you want to be on. So that's a very big decision for you as a public podcast host. So when you're a podcast host, it means you have a hosting platform. That's typically what it means. If you have a podcast and you're listening to this and you know you have a podcast, you technically have a podcast hosting platform, because there's no way you can podcast like this without having a podcast hosting platform that can distribute to podcast directories or podcast players. So when you have one RSS feed to many podcast players, that's a good way for you to increase your capacity over time. So think about it like this. If you have a business, welcome Eng. Think about it as a business. You have a public podcast. You have a public website. Now, if you have a public podcast, that means you have public accessibility to people. You have public accessibility to people, which means anyone that clicks on your link that is interested in your topic will listen to your voice and listen to your message. That's a public podcast. The only reason why someone listens to your podcast is because they clicked on something they are interested in. If they're not interested in that topic, they're not going to click on it. It's that simple. So the more attractive your podcast SEO, your podcast keywords, your podcast questions, your podcast topics, your podcast phrases, your podcast, I would call it your podcast stories. The more you're able to do that consistently, the better it's going to be for your business to grow, because when you have a public podcast, people can see you, they can hear you, they can connect with you. That's why when I look at what I'm doing right now, it could be one person in the room, it could be 10 people in the room, it could be 100 people in the room. I love that, because at every stage you realize that, oh, wow, I didn't know this was happening. And of course, it's super late in the night. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to talk about this because I know one day you're going to need this. And now I've spent a few minutes to talk about this because I know it's going to come up one day. So when I'm doing this, I'm showing you that I've done it myself. And I also want to show you how I've done it. So when it comes to how to choose between a public or private podcast, this is really where it stands and comes down to. So if you have a public podcast, it's great to have a public podcast, because how public your podcast will be is determined by how many podcast directories you submit your podcast RSS feed to. I know that was a mouthful. Welcome, Ila. But that is exactly what it is. If you capture that, if you save that, if you use that, if you maximize that, you'll be great. Because when you maximize your RSS feed and submit it to all different directories, you're winning, right? You can go to pod.link and see all the directories that are out there. There are more out there. So you submit to them, you link to them, you connect to them, and then you now show up on them. When you now show up on those platforms, and there are more, it's not just that platform, there are so many more. Thank you, Akach. Thank you for saying great tip. I appreciate you. And if you have any questions, please put in the chat. I'd love to hear from you, because I want to make sure that this is valuable to you too. So I thank you for that comment. When you submit to these platforms, you're technically submitting I can call it your resume, your digital resume to digital streaming platforms. Because when you have a digital podcast that's public, and in that public podcast, there's a title and a description which links to your website, that links to your social media, just like you have a website that links to your social media, that links to your profiles online, whether it's LinkedIn or any other platform that you can use. It shows that authenticity, because I could be talking here all day, and then if you look for me online and you can't find me, there's no way you can link my voice to any trust score or any evidence that will affirm or even justify what I'm saying, unless there's something to prove for that point. So if there's going to be something that backs it up based on consistency, based on relativity, based on activity. So I look at it from that perspective, and I'm like, yeah, of course, definitely. If I do it this way, even if it's for a little bit, it's going to go a long way. You never know what's going to happen. As long as you do it and consistently you do it well, eventually it will just find its way. So by podcasting publicly, you're putting your keywords that you've researched by targeting them into your podcast description. So now imagine you've put your podcast directory, which is usually about 4,000 characters, technically, with spaces. And now you've put in all the information that you need there, and you've published it. You've published your podcast. Now let's say you're on 30 different podcast players. Now 30 different websites have your one podcast show. That means you have 30 different websites that you can submit or distribute or link or click or redirect or tag, because they're all accessible and they're all on different entities. These are all different companies. These are all different websites. These are all different brands, but they're all interconnected back to you. So it's a full cycle. It's a full circle loop. So if you submit to all these platforms and they all have great domain authority and they're linking back to you, that means the people who are on those platforms will connect back to you. I mean, it makes so much sense. If you look at the top websites that are visited in the world, Wikipedia is one of them, Google is one of them, right? The list goes on. YouTube is one of them. If you look at all these platforms, you can see that these platforms, they're visited because there's a consistency in delivery and they're public and they're accessible. So they all have communities, they all have search volumes, they all have visits per month. So now imagine, welcome Latricia, imagine every month you're getting a score because you show up consistently and people keep coming back to listen to you. The more you keep showing up consistently like this, eventually one day someone's going to say, hey, I need help. Hey, I need to work with you. Hey, I need to refer you to someone. Hey, I need to do this. Hey, I need your help. Something's going to happen. And you never know because you don't know what people need. You don't know what people are asking for. But the more you deliver, the more you receive. So with a public podcast as a business, this would be the perfect way to do it. Because as a business, if you're starting from scratch and you're trying to gain authority online, honestly, using a podcast and distributing it to people that actually search for you in real time, the way they type is the way you type, then it's going to create a match, right? And that match is going to be happening because people are going to say, hey, what are the best top podcasts for this or for that? And because you've said those words in those brackets or in those spaces, then you've been able to actualize them. Imagine turning them into actual links, hyperlinks. That's where it even gets more exciting. So if you really think about it long term as a business, your goal is to create the vision. And as you're creating the vision, you're building the vision by staying consistent with how your content is going to be seen across different boards. Because the more podcast episodes that you release, is like a windmill, right? The more you release, the more you can spin off. If I have only one episode on my show, of what benefit is it to anyone? It may be of some benefit, but it's not going to be consistently sustainable or even scalable. Now, if you turn that one episode to 100 episodes, now you have 2 years worth of content that someone can binge on. When you turn that 100 to 250 to 500 episodes, to 1,000 episodes plus, you start realizing you have a lot of bandwidth, you have a lot of capacity, you have a lot of equity, you have a lot of connections. Now you have a lot of content, you have a lot of everything you need. So now you can flip that, turn it into anything that you want, and the list is endless. I won't even go into that today. But if you just look at your content and say, my podcast is my intellectual property and it is my business and it is my idea and it is my vision and it's what people are using to connect with me, and they listen to me and they actually love what they're listening to, it's a great gain. So as a public podcaster, you're connecting with so many people in so many different places. My podcast is called We Don't Play. You're listening to the We Don't Play podcast show. This podcast started off as a clothing line. It started off as an athleisure wear line. It started off as a t-shirt. It started off as an idea. And it turned into a podcast. 6 years later, we're literally around 600 episodes. We're listened to in 155 countries. We're in 11 seasons. We're about to jump into this 12th season. The 12th season is going to be exciting. And every season, it's just growing and growing and growing, and more people are listening. Especially this last 30 days, shout out to you listening from Brazil, because Brazil has actually been on the high rise. Brazil actually surpassed US in downloads. And I'm going to talk about something about podcasting that just reminded me. Thank you, Holy Spirit. I just remembered this. There's a difference between downloads and unique listeners. So I'm just putting a bug in your ear, and we'll come back to this because it's still on the basis of podcasting, either public or private. So when you look at your business, your website, your podcast, your brand, whether it's public or private, there's a way people are going to connect with you. And like right now, I'm connected with a lot of people in Brazil. And I love that. And I love that you're listening, and I appreciate you listening because it means a lot. So when you start looking at the long-term gain of building relationships with people, it becomes really personal. I would say podcast is a really personal place. Podcasting is a personal place because people are listening to you personally. They're not listening to the radio. They're listening to your voice on a device, online, and they're connecting with you. They're downloading. There's a difference between downloading and unique listening. So the same way when you think about analytics, impressions, and reach, all these metrics that we do with marketing, they're all the same thing. It's just different analogies or different ways of looking at it. That's why I look at Pinterest and podcasts the same, because it just depends on how you slice it, right? And SEO is literally, I look at SEO like building a house, like a website. If you don't have a house that is strong, then how are you going to stand or withstand the pressure? Or let's say you have a viral clip or a viral video or a viral something and your website crashes because you don't have the right bandwidth. It's going to be a problem, right? There are some websites that crash. We've seen websites like Facebook.com. We've seen websites like, there are many others that shut down for a few hours and they come back. So when you think about servers and all these things, they're very important. So if you have a podcast, you're not depending on all these platforms to show your relevance or show that, hey, I'm here, yet you've been here because you are here. But the way you're showing up online is different. You move different. If you have a frequently asked questions episode about your business and everyone's answering or going to that episode because you've answered all the questions about your business, you have less phone calls, you have less Zoom calls. But now the ones that you actually pick up and the ones that you meet or the ones that you see in person or virtually become even more contextual, they become more refined because you've actually scratched the surface, if that makes sense. So you've been able to allow people to get a feel of you, connect with you, get to really understand how you work, how you move, what you do, just to have an idea. And that way they're able to feel comfortable talking to you. And that way you're able to build relationships with them. That's why podcasting for me has been a blessing, because since 2019, August 12th, I've been podcasting and I didn't know it was going to become this. I never even joined Clubhouse until I started a podcast. I started a podcast in 2019. I joined Clubhouse in 2020. November 24th, 2020 is when I joined Clubhouse. So it's about to be 5 years on Clubhouse. That's a lot of time, a lot of hours. So I've been doing this for a long time and I'm still excited. There's still more to learn. Like, I'm not even close. I'm just going, but I know that this is something that's big. So when I think about all these things, it's very important to look at it. Welcome, Sergey. So your business, your podcast is big, and you can really do big with the podcast if you use a public podcast. Now, I'll talk about a private podcast because I've talked about public podcasts and just told you exactly how it works. So when you want to know how to choose, you can rewind and you can go back to that one. All right, we're now going to go into private podcasts. Now, private podcast is different. It's a different beast. It's like a different machine. It's a different algorithm. Now, with private podcasting is not public. I know that's obvious, but let me explain. Private podcast is not public in the sense that what we talked about earlier with the RSS feeds, you still have an RSS feed that is private, but it's not publicly listed. In other words, it's ineligible to be listed because it's a private feed. Kind of like a VPN, right? When you're on a network, when you think about those things, it's different, right? Virtual private network. That's different from a completely different network. That's a public network when you're on the internet, right? So when you look at all these things we're talking about, it's things that we do. We are on the internet every day. So it's not something that's rocket science. It's happening. So when you look at it from the perspective or the technical perspective or a different lens on private podcasting, it's different, right? With private podcasting, it's where you're able to now upload audio or video, just like you do with public podcasting. But the difference is you don't show up on Apple, you don't show up on Shopify, or Spotify rather. Even if you build a website with Shopify, you won't show up on Spotify for music or for podcasts or for audiobooks. You won't show up on that platform. You won't show up on Pandora. You won't show up on Listen Notes. Why? Because private podcasting requires authentication. That is a major difference. And I'll explain this even further, and I want to go a little deeper. Private podcasting.
Wherever you go, whatever they get into, from chill time to everyday adventures, protect your dog from parasites with Credelio Quattro. For full safety information, side effects, and warnings, visit CredeliaQuattroLabel.com. Consult your vet or call 1-888-545-5973. Ask your vet for Credelio Quattro and visit QuattroDog.com.
Is only accessible by authentication. In other words, if you want to access this uploaded audio or video that I have done, and maybe it's a tutorial or a course or a workshop or a training or whatever it is, whether it's internal, external, you would have to log in and sign in or even sign up to get access to the private podcast. Now, the private podcast could be free. You can make it free. That's why I started off like that. But most times when people make their private podcast, because you already have a public accessible podcast, why make a private podcast free when you already have a free public podcast? Unless you have an internal community that you want to have a free private podcast, and then that's cool, maybe as a bonus. But most times, more often than not, people would actually sign up or use private podcasting and make it paid. Now, when it's paid, your next question would be, okay, let's say I pay for this private podcast. How am I going to listen to it? Just like you would pay for, just like you'd pay for Amazon Prime, or you'd pay for Netflix, or you pay for any, sports channel that you like to watch, or any sports, streaming platform that you like to binge on. Those platforms are giving you access to their, I won't call it private feeds, but their subscriptions or their database. You're getting access to their feed. You're paying for it. So think about Netflix as a private podcast, but now in video form. Think about Amazon Prime as a podcast, as a private podcast, but in video form. If you just reverse, kind of look at it like a Rubik's Cube. If you just flip it, reverse it, turn it, you will see it's the same difference, because you're paying a fee to access property. The same way you would pay a private podcast feed to access the RSS feed and log in with your account and then access the post or access the video or access the audio, because within that private podcast that has been set up, you have access to all these things, right? The two private podcast platforms that I always recommend, and I have both of them, and I'm going to be talking more about them in 2026, God willing. I've just been taking time about this, and I said, you know what, it's now time to really break this down. And a lot of people are doing it, but it's not as public as most people say. So that's why I'm talking about this for the first time. And I don't know how much I'll bring back, but I'll definitely do more of this in a different way. There are two platforms that I've looked at. One, the first time I looked into private podcasting was in 2019 or 2020, one of the two. And I remember I talked to a company, before I tell you their name, and they're all the way in Canada. And I talked to their team and I was like, you guys, this is cool. This is super cool. Like, how does this work? Okay, you connect your Stripe account and then you upload your audio. If you, let's say you do YouTube and you have a YouTube channel and you make your YouTube videos private, you can put the private link from YouTube into your private podcast, accessible only in your private community. Like, we were geeking out like that. This was 5 years ago. And I was like, whoa, this would be nice to do. But I said, you know what? When the time is right, I'll bring it out and we'll make it happen. So it's been cooking. And now, now you're seeing a little bit of the taste of what has been happening. So I spoke with them and I said, this would be really cool for communities and, let's build. And we just, from that day, we haven't spoken again, but we've maintained that relationship and we've built that because I still have an account from that day till now. And this platform is called Supercast, right? Supercast, like broadcast, Supercast, like Superman, Supercast. Supercast.com is a private podcast platform, and you can put any amount, you can do paid plans, however you want to do it. It's a great place to be. And I have mine. I'm not going to show you mine because I don't want to advertise that today. I'll bring this back later, but if you have any questions, just click the link above and sign up and you'll get exclusive information when it's ready, because I always like to make sure that I'm not overwhelming you or even underwhelming you. I want to make sure that it's the right dose, the right time for the right information. So you can leave your contact information at the top. Just click the link and choose which option you like, and then put your best email and name. And that way we'll be able to have that conversation and you will be able to get emails and be part of the community where I send out emails exclusively. So I said, okay, let's do this. So Supercast is a great platform where you can actually build an actual community that pays monthly. You can set up recurring fees, whether it's $5 a month or $50 a month, even if it's $50,000 a year, whatever you want to put there, it's yours. It's your private property. You do what you want. It's your access. It's your title deed. It's your domain. So you can do that as well. The second platform that I like that is really good too, I just got to know about them, I think it was last year, which is really good too. It's called Hello Audio. Hello Audio. Hello Audio. Hello Audio. That's the next platform. That's the second one that I recommend. Hello Audio. And Hello Audio.fm is a good platform that you could actually check out. And you could try for 7 days and you can see all about it. It's a great platform. And shout out to Amy Porterfield. She's also someone that is great, and she's also a part of that amazing community too. And you'll just be able to see it for yourself, and they even give you a test run so you can see it and see what it talks about: lead magnets, e-commerce, newsletters. You can do coaching, you can do so many things in there. It's a great platform for you to check out. So you have two options. I like to make sure that you have two options so you can choose, make your decision, and then take it forward from there. But if you're hearing this and you're like, wow, how did I get into this information? Or why do I even need this? Or if I needed this, what am I going to do next? The next thing I would say is, if you have a business, let's say corporately, right? Or if you have a corporation, this would be a great way for you as a business if you have a private podcast that is free, that is accessible by authentication, which I talked about earlier. If you have a business, you can create a podcast. I mean, you already have a training module. People do training, and I'm not trying to change anything, but I'm just showing you how with podcasting, you can have a different perspective. And it doesn't have to be done anyways. It's just something that food for thought. If you have an audio version, and especially let's say you do training, and because I love working with teams, and if you have a training with a team, maybe try this out if you have a business or a corporation. And let's say you onboard your staff, your team members and your leaders, your managers, your board, whatever you're doing, and you get to know how people like to learn or how best they like to acquire new information, either by auditory learning, visual learning, kinesthetic learning, mathematical learning, logical learning, however you want to put it, by putting quizzes or anything that's going to make them grasp the concept and actually have a full proof of concept. If somebody can have a full proof of concept based on how they're able to learn by your system, that's a great way for them to get more information. Welcome, Angela, as well. It's a great way for you to gain more over time, because if, let's say, 35% of staff say they want to do auditory learning or they learn by auditory learning, then you have a private podcast RSS feed that they can internally sign up to with their work email and then have access to the training by audio. You don't have to sell it. Just put a tag on it and say it's $0, or put a price on it and put a promo code that will give them access to it complimentarily. And then they have access to it and they're able to go through the training by audio. That's for private podcasting. If you want to monetize as a business, you can do it for branding. If you have brands and you say, okay, we have 3 brands, 5 brands, or we have 1 brand, and this brand is sponsoring this private podcast, then the people in that community can access complimentary upgrades from that business because of the partnership. I mean, I'm just thinking out loud here as I'm speaking, because the way you can do this extensively as a business can really change your business completely. Because people say, oh, how do I monetize my podcast? You monetize by publicly showing up to people or for people who need help with information or with services or with solutions that you can provide authentically and ethically, legally and sonically, because they also have to match your energy and also have to match your intent, right? So when people are connecting with you and your interests are linked or connected or interconnected, then you can say, okay, this is what we have, this is what we do. And that way you're able to have a great experience with them. So if you're building a private podcast, if you're building a public podcast and you're starting off with public and you submit to all these RSS feeds, you daily publish content, you already know where people go. You go to podseo.com, for example, and get what you need. If you need an affiliate link, you can reach out to me. I talked to the co-founder. We had a podcast episode, and he's actually the founder, and had an amazing discussion about the platform. So if you need that information, reach out to me too, so you can save some money. These are the things that will help you grow. Because imagine having a private podcast as a business or as a corporation, and you have this type of auditory access for training. And then let's say you have a public one and you're doing that for everyone else to know about your company, or you talk about key leaders, or let's say you guys do blogs or documentation and you turn that into news, or maybe do like commentaries. I don't know what you're going to do. I'm just giving you like a ball of information that you can do anything you want. It's your world. You can choose. I'm not there. It's not my place to say what to do or what you can do. But I know you can, because you're a genius, and whatever you use will turn into something that's useful and tangible to make the result you're looking for long term, so that you can also achieve the goals and the tasks that you need in record time. So if you use a business and you turn that with a public podcast, with a private podcast too, you're golden. Because with a public podcast, you're showing up for people and for people's needs, and they're typing based on what they need, and they're matching it to you. Why are they matching it to you? Because your titles are making sense. It's not season 1, episode 1 equals this. It's mental health tips for then episode 1, or season 1, episode 1. Social media marketing trends for I'm just giving you random examples. Whatever the leading conversation is what people are going to stick with. I said mental health and social media. Those are 2 different, completely extreme opposites. So if I'm looking at that link and you're looking at that link, whatever you click on is based on what you like. So the more you click on things you like, and the more I create links that you like, the more you like the links that you click on, which will lead you to becoming a unique listener, which is what I talked about before. Because a download is, oh yeah, I like this song, I'll download it. And then after a few weeks, you don't listen to the song anymore. But if you listen to this song consistently because you downloaded it the first time, it's like, oh yeah, I want to play that jam, I want to play that song, I want to play that bop, or I want to listen to that episode, I want to catch up on that show. That's a different experience. When you go to the gym, when you go to take a walk, when you're driving, these are the platforms that you're going to go to look for this information, because you've saved them somewhere as a playlist. So if you have a private podcast, you can monetize. If you have a public podcast, you can globalize. Honestly, you can. How to choose? Start off with public before you go private, because the more you're able to know how to do it publicly, the better you're able to achieve it privately. I mean, if you do it privately first, more power to you. But I started off publicly because I was able to learn what my audience needed, what they want, who they even are, where they listen to, where they listen from, where they listen for. all these things I wouldn't know until I'm able to read the data. That's why I love analytics so much, because the more I'm able to read, the more I'm able to understand these things, and it can actually grow long term. So if you have any questions about public podcasts or private podcasts, RSS feeds, now is the time. Wilbur, Akach, Sergey, Angela, please let me know if you have any questions in the chat. If you have any questions, you can raise your hand too, and I'd love to bring you up so we can talk. But I just definitely see a big need for this. And if this is something that is going to help you make a better decision on how to do it, especially from the point of view of actually starting one, it's a great way to start a podcast like this, because when you have a podcast, you can do a lot, you can say a lot. There are podcast episodes I've talked about 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago that are still being listened to today. It's like a song that you listened to 5 years ago that you still listen to today. It's the same effect. It's an MP3. So if you have an MP3 that's an audio, or you have an MP4 that's a video, you have a PDF, you have a TXT, right? That's text, right? Even a PDF or a PNG or a JPEG would be image. If you have these media assets that are very sounding basic, like the way I'm saying them sounds like, oh yeah, we have that. Yeah, you can have that, and you can have more of that. Because the more you're able to build with creating more content for your websites, building more content for your business, building more content for the way you create more consistency online, it just becomes a very safe place for you to grow. So if you're thinking about what to choose between a public podcast or a private podcast, the choice is yours. But I've given you a long list of websites, so listen to the replay and check out which options you'd like to start with. My recommendation is start off with creators.spotify.com, or just type in anchor.fm. Whichever one you click on will take you to that website, or you can just type on Google Spotify for podcasters. When you type that and you create an account, a free account, you can set it up, get started, and start for free. That's how I started. And today, here's where we are. To God be the glory. There's so much more. So much more that's going to be happening. But if you really think about this long term and ask yourself, where am I going to be a year from now, 2 years from now, 10 years from now? It starts off with your podcast. It starts off with your voice, because you're the one that's going to speak life into your show, speak life into your podcast. So if you talk about these things and you actually let them happen, you're literally immortalizing, if I can even say that, or you're creating a whole new experience for yourself, because you're actually putting it into a system or an ether that is going to be out there for you as a business, or as a brand, or as a person, or as an authority, or as a credible source. So that can definitely help. No, I don't speak Spanish. No mas. I don't. I wish I could. That would have been nice. Angela, thank you so much. But if you have a question, I can, you can put it in the chat, and then I could try to translate it with the app, and then send it back to you and translate it, if that helps, because I want to make sure that, it's helpful if you do have a question. But that was a very great question. Thank you for being here. Public podcasts versus private podcast RSS feeds on both ends. Both a public podcast RSS feed and a private podcast RSS feed are very important platforms to consider. So if you want to know how to choose, the next step is to start off with the Spotify for creators, and then, create your account, sign up, and get started. Submit to your RSS feeds. Go to pod.link and submit to those feeds. And then from there, once you submit to those feeds, the next thing you can do is start uploading your episodes and start dropping them, making sure people are seeing them. the more you do it more consistently, the more people will find you. And it doesn't take a lot of episodes to get up there. It takes a few. Like once you start hitting that momentum, 4, 8, 12, 24, 48, it just starts getting better and better. So try it out for yourself and let me know how it goes. But I hope this helped you and give you some insights on how to use a public podcast and differentiate it from a private podcast RSS feed. So thank you for listening. God bless you. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you, Wilver, and anyone listening as well. If you have listened to this, please like this, leave a review, connect. Let's talk. Let's have a conversation and make this happen. So until then, we're going to meet in the next episode. Have a great night. God bless you. Enjoy your weekend. And I'm going to see you in the next episode.
Now, that was an episode, right? Thank you so much for listening to the We Don't Play podcast show. I'm so glad that you're here and you are sticking tight with us, especially to the very end. Now, this is season 11 and we're going to do it differently. And I want to make sure that every episode you listen to has something to give back so that you can also learn more after you listen. Now, We Don't Play podcast show is where you listen, you live, you learn, and you earn. So if you're in any of those positions out of those 4, please make sure that you reach out to me. Send out an email through info@playinc.online. That's info@playinc.online. Or you could go to playinc.online, which is a website, www.playinc.online, playinc.online, and schedule a call so that we can get you on an SEO discovery call to talk about your business and help you with your marketing needs. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope this helped you. See you in the next episode. God bless you.